Friends, the US-Iran confrontation is reaching a climax. Yesterday as well, Trump gave a warning during the Gaza Board of Peace to the Iranians, saying they better make a deal if they know what's better for them. Well, in this episode, the dilemmas for Trump are as follows. Firstly, his MAGA base is against any kind of conflict. He's betting that if it's just an air war, they won't complain too much. That is to be seen. Last time when he had bombed just for one day, many supporters such as Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, they'd all broken away. His second dilemma is that if he doesn't attack, then he disappoints the Israelis and the Israel lobby in the US, which are putting a lot of pressure. Netanyahu just recently visited him. On top of that, he also disappoints the anti-regime Iranians, both within Iran, those protesters who have suffered, and outside Iran and in the US, anti-regime group. His fourth problem is he hasn't prepared the country for any kind of armed conflict. That is, unlike George Bush, who had in the run-up to the Iraq war made wide-ranging public speeches, and so had his cabinet ministers convincing the people, some truthful, some lies, about what a threat Iraq constituted, etc. Largely these were lies. So Trump hasn't prepared either his base or the public or the politicians. And related to that is the disaster of the Iraq war, which is weighing on everyone's mind, these forever wars. The base doesn't want to get into that, and Trump himself campaigned against those wars in his first term. In his second term, he said they were big mistakes. And the sixth big dilemma facing him is that there is no clearly defined political objective in this war. That is, one day they say we want regime change. Second day, Marco Rubio will say that regime change is not possible or not easy. Trump himself has stopped talking about regime change recently. One day they will say we want a halt to nuclear enrichment. Second day, they'll say we want a limitation on their missile range. That also they seem to have now kind of dropped because they're not talking about it, though Israel is pressing a lot on that and will feel disappointed if a deal comes out without that. On a third day, they'll say you have to stop supporting Houthis and Hamas, Hezbollah, your external proxies. Now, even you don't hear much on that. So there are no clearly defined objectives. Some days they'll say we are doing it in support of the protesters, but now there's not much talk of that either. So there is no clearly defined political objective. And one of the lessons of the Vietnam War was that there should be clearly defined political objectives. Otherwise, the US risks getting stuck in a quagmire. And even when there were clearly defined objectives in Iraq or in Afghanistan, under George Bush, the US ended up getting stuck anyways. So this problem of clearly defined political objectives is very important before starting a war. The seventh problem is one of leaving a legacy. Trump knows that this is possibly his last term. He's aging. And Netanyahu seems to have convinced him, as have some pro-Israel members of Trump's White House, such as the Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, etc., that, attacking Iran will leave behind a legacy. People will remember him for years, etc. So kind of these people have become kind of whisperers in Trump's ear. There used to be a tradition in Greece and in Rome that when a winner of the Olympics or a conqueror general came back, he would often be received with a laurel wreath and he would be paraded in a chariot. But this wreath would be carried on top of his head by an assistant rather than being placed on his head. This assistant would keep whispering into his ears that don't be too proud. You too are mortal. You too will die. So that he remembers that he's a man and does not start believing that he is some kind of immortal god. But here, the opposite is happening. That is Netanyahu, Stephen Miller, etc., whispering into Trump's ear that you are actually a demigod and at the cusp of immortality if you just do this much more. So it has been Israel's strategy, as you know, to not just defeat everybody else in the Middle East, but also to leave them in a weakened state. So for example, they encouraged the attack on Iraq in 2003, kind of building it up as a threat, and their neocon pro-Zionist supporters pushed George Bush towards it. Similarly, with Syria, they did not want Obama to intervene, the US to intervene. They wanted Assad to remain in a weakened state so that Syria remains a mess and weak, with civil war continuing. Even after Ahmad al-Sharaa came, they've been supporting the Kurds, the Druze, the Alawites, to leave a splintered Syria. And they have done the same thing now across the... Even now they're talking poorly of Turkey, building it up as an enemy and a threat. They cannot... they did the same thing with Hamas and Fatah, the PLO. That is, Netanyahu kept supporting Hamas in an indirect way by allowing resources and money to reach it before 2023, because he didn't want Hamas and Fatah to combine. He wanted them to remain split so that he could say to the external world that I don't have any negotiator on the other side. He could plead, that, hey, these guys are divided among themselves. But it was Israeli strategy, and specifically Netanyahu's strategy, to continue this way. Now, with respect to Iran also, ideally Netanyahu would like a splintered Iran. And that's why regime change or no regime change, they would like an attack to be done such that the government is weakened or falls, and the minorities, that is the Azeris, the Kurds, etc., the Marsh Arabs, they kind of splinter away, so that what is left behind is a much weaker Iranian core, and they don't mind even if it falls into civil war. But the other surrounding Arab countries don't want that. Iraq, Saudi, even I think Qatar and UAE don't want that, because it will create instability massive in the region. Of course, it will lead to huge oil prices and all kind of difficulties for India as well. The final difficulty that Trump is having is that the deal, whatever deal he comes up with Iran, has to be better than Obama's JCPOA deal. Because he throughout said, when the deal was being negotiated, that this is the worst deal. When he got rid of it in 2018, he said he would have never negotiated such a deal. In fact, he would have walked out of the room. There couldn't be a worse deal in the world. So if he were to come back and just say that, look, Iran stops uranium enrichment for 10 years and nothing else, it would not fly. It would not fly generally with his own base, with the Israelis. So the bar for a settlement also is that much higher, apart from the fact that it would upset the Iranian protesters, who actually he doesn't care about because they don't vote for him, nor do they fund him. But it wouldn't satisfy the Israel lobby, etc. And he himself, because he has put himself in a corner by saying that I'm locked and loaded, etc., and building up such a massive fleet. For the Iranians, the dilemma is much more acute. That is, they face survival issues. They know that the amount of firepower the US has, thousands of cruise missiles, aircraft, bombers, you name it, submarines, aircraft carriers, they know that they cannot match that firepower. But on the other side, completely giving up any nuclear enrichment, which was one of the pillars of the regime, stopping support to all proxies, getting rid of their missile program or limiting it, would leave them completely defenseless externally, and also would take away any legitimacy the regime has internally. So Khamenei and others in the top have calculated, hey, rather than go down in this way by getting bombed every 6 months by Israel and the US and losing your legitimacy, let's try and absorb any punishment that they will deliver. even though they know that they're in a very weakened state. They know that a large section of the population is against them, and if there is any kind of widespread bombing, then they risk an internal civil war and revolt. They still feel that we will anyway end up falling if we agree to all the conditions being set. So maintain a firm stance, give a little bit on enrichment, nuclear enrichment, but don't cave in. And so they are ready to absorb a certain amount of punishment. They think they can survive that. But what you're seeing is brute realism in action. That is, the Iranians are really struggling for their life. And all calculations for them are high risk. It is a sum-zero game for them in some ways. So what is actually going to happen, in my opinion? Well, I think both sides gain by not fighting. And so that seems to be the most likely outcome. Trump gains by keeping his base intact, etc. And midterm elections are coming up this year. So he doesn't want to upset too many people. Already his approval ratings are quite low at about 36%. The Iranians, of course, gain the breathing space, etc. But you can never say whether this is what will happen because of two problems. There's a time constraint. The Iranians were given 14 days to come back with their proposals. 4 days have already passed, only 10 days are left. If they're not able to meet that deadline, and the US cannot keep such a large force in the Persian Gulf indefinitely, 2 carrier strike groups and hundreds of planes, etc. Air defense interceptors, air-to-air refuelers, dozens of them, electronic warfare aircraft. Can't keep all of them on readiness for so long. On top of that, we in international relations who study wars know that wars quite often start with miscalculations, with mistakes. And so this kind of a tense atmosphere with stress on both sides, with pressures on both sides, could lead to some rash decisions. And so we cannot completely rule out war. So keep watching. I'll keep bringing you updates and also new topics. Please like, subscribe, and share the channel if you're getting something out of it, because we really need some viewership now. Thank you.